Good afternoon, evening, morning, wherever it is in the world that you are, and welcome in to the iFormula League Formula 1 series here from Road America. And today we have a very interesting, I believe you would say, race in terms of for the season, with only 3 rounds left, including this one, along with also finally starting to figure out who is going to take the win in the championship, who's taking the lead of the championship, and at a course that, honestly, it's going to be interesting to see how the F1 cars handle it. It's not exactly a course that's typically, I would say, well received within the Formula series. Definitely seems more enjoyable to the, you would say, Indy cars more than it is F1 cars, but always good to see that we're always trying new things here in the sim racing world, trying to bring in some new tracks, just a new flavor to the Formula series. Of course, with how we are in the iFormula League as well, we do have qualifying on right now, which will set our grid for our feature race today, which is 28 laps, followed off by an 8-lap sprint after that. And of course, from there, we then will figure out who in the last 2 races of the season is going to be taking the overall championship here. We have the Canadian Grand Prix next week, followed off by the Brazilian Grand Prix after that to end the season. And it's going to be interesting seeing as, if we take a look at the current standings, I unfortunately cannot put them up on stream for you all today, but I will try to endeavor to do that for next week and also the week after that, so that we can try and at least get the stream up as often as possible in terms of the standings, so you guys can follow along at home. Also trying to see whether or not we are actually live. Indeed we are. As I say, so our current championship standings at the moment, Intense Sim Racing look to be running away with it, and I feel like this is going to be how the championship is going to follow along. I think Ben Goldthorpe and Rolly Shilter a little bit too far away now, especially if they take a win today. If Ben gets a win today and either Riley and Oyvind don't turn up, then Ben will probably be taking the win of this championship. I feel as though himself and Rolly Shilter have done an amazing job throughout the season to at least keep it close enough to where if the Racing Lab boys don't finish the season off strong, then, well, you know, the Race Lab team, we know they're good, but if they don't show up, they aren't winning. And that's allowed the Intense Sim Racing team to really start pushing. And we may see an Intense Sim Racing 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the championship later on, near the final couple of rounds. However, it does mean we will need good results from Gianluca Iliano and Hannes Schlogel to really start to push and overtake Riley Jacob and Oyvind Haugland. I'm not sure if both of them are out today because of them just not feeling it, or in general if they've had other things to do. At some point, I'm sure we will see that come in, and we'll get an idea as to why certain drivers have not been showing up. The grid is a little bit small today. I'd imagine most people, in terms of Road America, don't really own the circuit, and that's potentially one of the reasons why. It's not exactly a popular circuit, unless, of course, you're into sports car racing, in which case, very popular indeed. So, enough about that, and the championship standings as it is at the moment. Ben Goldthorpe, as I say, leading the way from Rolly Shilter, Ben with 222 points, and Rolly Shilter with 206, respectively. Riley Jacob with 195, and Oyvind Haugland with 192. Gianluca Iliano with 168 and Hannes Schlegel with a 152 are the most notable names at the moment, is seeing whether or not effectively the Intend guys can really start to push, at least the flat out side of Intend can really start to push, overtake the Racing Lab team, and if they can do that, then, well, we stand a good chance of seeing a rather exciting championship. But enough about that. Let's see whether or not we can get on board potentially with a couple of drivers, shall we? Let's move on to... Let's see if Hannes Schlegel's currently on a lap. Not sure if they are. I'm sure we will find out at some point. Doesn't look like they are, but Ben Goldthorpe definitely is. Hasn't set a lap yet so far this qualifying session, but this one that they're on does seem to be rather quick, going green in the first two sectors, purple through sector 3. Coming through the sector 4 timing splits in a moment. We'll see whether or not they are also purple. They are not. They are slightly down on that, actually. And only a couple corners to go, but 2 more sectors, so we'll see how quick Ben Goldthorpe is here. Navigates through the final corner. Very, very tricky corner, this, especially in these Formula cars, as we see. I believe that was either Eystein Schierploen or Alex Shanna going off there in the background. Could have also been Troy Banks with that colour scheme, but Ben Goldthorpe does currently put himself second overall with a 1 minute 33 flat. Hannes Schlegel's current fastest lap with a 1:32.9, so pretty good from Hannes. Gianluca Iliano looking to try and maybe get involved as well. Purple through sector 2. Let's see if we can get a little bit on board as well with Gianluca Iliano, see how Gianluca handles the bumps and curves of the Road America circuit. Not quite flat through the carousel. I was wondering if it was gonna be. That's why I kind of went a little bit silent, wondering to see whether or not it would be flat out through the carousel with these cars. And I'm not entirely sure whether DRS detection zones are here either, or where the DRS zones are. So going to be interesting from a strategy standpoint how the DRS plays a factor. Obviously the circuit not really used to holding F1, so without it seemingly being down the start-finish straight, as Gianluca Iliano places himself in third for now. It looks like potentially there is only one DRS zone here around this circuit, and it is coming up right about now. So it is just the back straight after the little kink before we go into the final sector. Going to be a move for a lot of dive bombs there, but you don't want to overcook it like Hannes has just done, as that could very easily ruin your lap. But let's go on board with Ben Goldthorpe then as we go into turn 1. Down 2 gears, hitting the apex nicely, pick up the throttle early, at least as early as you can. So it looks like there's also another DRS detection zone a little bit further up. So 2 DRS zones, one of which is on the first straight after turn 1. And then the second one is after the kink, just before the final sector, which 2 really good places actually to have DRS zones. It's going to allow a lot of moves to be made, especially considering how long that straight is before turn 4 or 5. I always forget the exact corner numbers. I'll have to try and pull them up on a separate screen, just so I can see. It is turn 5. I always forget, as Gianluca, unfortunately, has a little bit of a mistake there. Let's see if Alex Shanna's able to improve at all. A little bit of a different style livery I'm seeing, actually, I think, for Alex Shanna. And seems to be a lot more black on the back of the car than there used to be. I always thought it used to be more whiter down near the engine cover, but it's looking like it's, I don't want to say inverted colours, but yeah, pretty much. Also, a lot of these drivers, this will be their home race, their home circuit. Jacob Bisa as well, I've just noticed, putting it up into 3rd place. Very good result for him so far. Gonna have to see if he can continue on, because if he can, that's gonna be incredible for the Bisa Racing team. Being able to take the fight to the top guys. A little bit of a mistake there from Alex Shanna as well. A little bit too early on the power, and we see just how easy these cars are to spin up the rears, especially with the lack of downforce now. That was obviously one of the big changes they wanted to make throughout the season, was they said when the W12 was so dominant, we said, right, we're going to rewrite the record books, we're going to rewrite the way that cars will generate downforce moving forward. We're going to focus more on underfloor aero than we are aero that flows over the top, with bodywork manipulation and all the rest of it. So hopefully what that would enable, in theory, as Alex Shanna locks up the brakes and just goes straight there, but in theory what that was going to enable us to have is closer racing, because everyone is, you know, everyone is generating more downforce from underfloor. So as long as you can keep the car low, you're not going to be affected, really, by the car in front. In reality, has that happened? I mean, I think that's all definitely a matter of opinion. I think there is a case to be made for both seeing closer racing, but also I feel like it's brought on a new series of issues. Obviously, we talk about the porpoising a lot. Thankfully, we don't have to worry about it in sim, but obviously the guys in real life have to worry about, you know, all the bumps and undulations and the way that the car reacts to certain things, and, you know, it's hard to get it right. Mercedes definitely haven't really gotten it right this year. Recently signed a new technical director. Well, reinstated the old technical director, I believe. It'll be interesting to see if that changes anything moving forward into the real world. But obviously here in sim racing, we have none of that silly R&D nonsense. We have just the drivers and their ability to drive this car as fast as possible around the same tarmac as everyone else. As Rolly Schilter and Gianluca Eliano put in their times. Gianluca improving, Rolly Schilter putting himself P5. P5? P5. P5. That's what I meant to say. 5th place. Just combine all of the sayings, why not? Also, looking at Icy and Schiapolone at the moment, putting themselves P6, and actually not that far off what Rolly Schilter was able to do at the moment, means that hopefully Rolly Schilter is going to have a little bit of a race on his hands. I think we're going to see potentially Hannes Schlogel and Ben Goldthorpe constantly fighting back and forth for potentially the win of this race. I think Rolly Schilter, if he wants to get the win, he's going to have to basically keep it clean and hope that Hannes and Ben fight it out a bit too hard between each other. Obviously, Jacob Bisa being there throws a little bit of a spanner into the works. Ben Goldthorpe is improving on his time in sectors 4, 1 and 2. But 3 and 5 not improving at all just yet. Looks like it's good though. Down again in the final sector, but enough for pole position. So Ben Goldthorpe, 132.8 flat. And that now puts the shoe on the other foot, as it were. Hannes now needs to really start trying to push, really start trying to make up the time, and seeing whether or not they can actually start fighting. Alex Shadow also currently improving. Would like to see them try and be above P10 if they can. But who knows, it is difficult. This circuit, very, very hard as well to really nail and just get everything right. I feel like this circuit is definitely a lot harder than others that we've had this season. I mean, Suzuka, you could argue, is one of those circuits that we've had this season that's been, for the most part, relatively tricky. But also, on the same token, we've had... Just need to go back through the schedule now. What have we had? Imola would have been a very difficult circuit for the drivers. Zandvoort, Suzuka, Road America. It's almost like what we've done is we've saved the hardest circuits until last, and we've got 3 on the bounce of Suzuka, Road America, and the Canadian Grand Prix circuit, all one after the other. So these drivers are really going to have their work cut out for them. That's definitely a hard stretch of races, followed off by obviously the Brazilian Grand Prix at the end of the season, which, I mean, love it or hate it, the Brazilian Grand Prix used to end every season, always used to provide drama, so we'll see if it continues to do so, even in the sim world. As Troy Banks will come across the line, and it does improve, puts himself ahead of where Alex Shannon was able to improve, so Alex Shannon now puts himself P8 with Troy Banks P7 and Icy and Shearpline P6, so almost looking like, you would argue, best of the rest from the Inten team, and then Jacob Bisa putting on an absolute clinic at the moment. Ian also maybe looking to improve with a good final 2 sectors. Does improve, but maybe not all the way. Needs to be just a little bit quicker to overtake Alex Shannon. But now we're almost into the same spot of, if you find 0.2 of a second, that could be the difference between you going from P8 to P5 even. And, you know, that's always exciting when we have a really, really close qualifying session. We hope that it stays that close throughout the race. And this circuit, I mean, I'm hoping it provides. We'll have to wait and see, because it is very tight, it is very technical. It's not something that these drivers are going to be particularly used to driving on. As Gianluca Iliano does now improve and puts themselves very, very, very close to that 1 minute 32 lap time that everyone seems to be wanting to try and chase and get into at the moment, to try and challenge Ben Goldthorpe and Hennes. Gianluca Iliano the closest so far without actually breaking it. So 1 minute 33.16. It looks like getting a 32 around here really is a challenge in itself. Murray Schulter was improving and made a little bit of a mistake, so not improving anymore. I wonder now, is any other driver going to be able to improve as we wind down from our qualifying session and go into our main race here, which once again I will reiterate is 28 laps here today, followed off by an 8-lap sprint. Estimated time of finish is probably going to be an hour from now, I would imagine. So, buckle in, ladies and gentlemen. Prepare yourself, because this one's going to be a good one. And Goldthorpe actually managing to improve through Sector 1, by the way. We see on the bottom of the screen there. For those of you who maybe... Oh, that is a big crash. Oh dear. I believe that is Ben Goldthorpe. Nope, that was Rolly Shilter, actually. Trying to maybe push a little bit too hard. And that is what ends up happening. But for those of you who are not used to seeing qualifying sessions in this way, or at least not used to seeing racing in general, let me just enlighten you about a few things that you'll see on your screen throughout the rest of this 5-minute session. So, in the bottom of every driver's name, you'll see that on the bottom of the screen, Ben Goldthorpe, kind of prime example of this, has all 3 colours on his timing screens, one of which was purple, 2 of which were green, 3 of which were orange. Those respond to the individual sectors that are laid out throughout the circuit, and then the colour represents how well they're doing in that specific sector. Purple being fastest of anyone so far this session, green being personal best for the driver, but not necessarily fastest of the session, and then orange being down compared to their personal best. And Ben Goldthorpe put on a ridiculous lap there to once again increase that gap to himself and Hannes, putting in a 1 minute 32.647. So almost a 1 minute 32.5. And some drivers are even struggling to break into the 32s at the moment. So, yeah, it's looking like Ben Goldthorpe might have this. Of course, another thing to mention as well is the way that qualifying is going to work is it will set the precedent for and the grid for the feature race, and the feature race result is going to be invert the top 12 drivers, and those drivers will then that will set the grid then for the main rather the sprint. So if you finish first in the feature, you'll be in 12th position or the next highest position if there's less than 12 drivers for our sprint race. So tactically, maybe not always the best to win the race, the main one, if you feel like you're going to struggle to go all the way from the back of the grid to the front of the grid in the sprint. Because those sprint points may actually end up making the difference here between a really, really, really good weekend and a really, really bad one. And of course, the other thing to note as well, for those of you watching on the IFL channel, tomorrow we will have the Formula 3 around the same time as this stream. The Formula 3, much larger grid, much more chaotic. The races are also shorter. I believe it's going to be 20 laps and then 5 laps for the sprint for the F3 guys. So we'll have to see just how mental the F3 is tomorrow. Always worth checking out. That'll be over on the Team Goon Squad channel. Obviously, massive respect to those guys for putting on that stream every week. We've seen Schiapolone then improving on their lap time. Currently in 7th place, but this lap could potentially see them move up into 4th, and indeed it does with a 1 minute 33.3. So again, not quite into those 32s, but at least we're getting a little bit closer for that top 4. We currently are on board with Gianluca Iliano, seeing whether or not Gianluca can actually get the overall pole position, or whether or not this lap is going to put them 2nd place, or whether or not they don't even improve enough. 1 minute 33.1, they're not going for another lap, so that is all she wrote for Gianluca. Troy Banks then, the only driver out on circuit, and if he's not on a lap, he's going to have this 1 lap to go. Because once that timer ticks to 0, anyone not on a lap that will be it for your qualifying session. So Troy Banks, one and done for Troy. If he improves on this lap, and if he can improve by at least 0.3 of a second, he will put himself P4, but unfortunately the iRacing gods told him that no, he wasn't allowed to get that lap in, and we go straight to the heat, which is our feature race today. A little bit unfortunate for Troy Banks there, but these things happen from time to time. But here is your grid then for race 1 out of 2 today. Ben Goldthorpe puts it on pole with a 1 minute 32.6, followed off by Hannes Schlogel, locking out the front row for the Intend Sim Racing team. Gianluca Iliano there in P3. Istein Schiapolone, an impressive result for Lumos in P4 with Troy Banks P5. Jacob Bisa in P6 for the Bisa Racing team, followed off by the other Intend Sim Racing driver of Rolly Schilter. Ian Rude for the B team of the Bisa Racing team in P8. Further down the grid, we have Alex Shanna for Lumos in P9, Frank Bisa there in P10, and rounding out the grid, Danny O'Keefe for Orion Legendary Racing in P11. And as we get underway, we will see if we can focus on the leader. As we try to get a good view of the race start. And let's see, now that everyone has gridded up, Ben Goldthorpe on the left, Hannes Schlogel on the right, Gianluca Iliano a bit further back as well. All of the lights are up, we are green, and we are go here from Road America. It looks like it's a good start from the Bisa Racing team, but unfortunately, with the circuit being so tight, doesn't look like anyone's able to make any moves just yet. Everyone currently getting through nice and clean. I don't think there's anyone who's making any crazy moves just yet, as we now move a little bit further back. And let's see, Jacob Bisa and everyone else making it through rather clean at the moment. Rolly Schilter trying to get his way past Ian Rude for the moment, but a little bit of side-by-side action going now into turn 4. Is he going to be able to outbrake? He does, but he also hits into Jacob Bisa, who is out of this race, or at least is damaged, you would have to imagine. That was a pretty heavy hit. Rolly Schilter's definitely damaged from that hit. I saw something, a piece of bodywork from someone. Yeah, that is no front wing for Rolly Schilter. That is a very unfortunate incident between the two. Could have been rather easily avoided as well, you would have to say. Jumping back on board then with the front runners. An Intend 1, 2, 3. Rolly Schilter with that incident, unfortunately not going to be able to make it an Intend 1, 2, 3, and 4. Troy Banks trying to fight with Hannes at the moment, but Hannes maybe just a little bit too strong for now. Noxie Motorsports, I believe, is the B team of the Lumos eMotorsports team. So going to be interesting to see whether or not Istein and Troy fight each other, or whether or not they work together to try and battle versus the more competitive Intend team. Of course, both Intend cars are very quick in their own right, and we have Danny O'Keefe spinning there in the background. Tries to avoid the barrier, does so, nicely done. That is him now just taking a little bit of a detour for the moment. Troy Banks actually managed to get past Hannes Schlogel there as well, so good move for Troy Banks. I want to see if I can try and maybe get an idea on what this move looked like from Troy's POV. Looks pretty elementary from Troy Banks. Just has the overspeed, dives on through. That is Troy Banks in the number 8 machine, past. And Hannes Schlogel now having to try and look for a way back past him. And obviously with this being a circuit that not a lot of people race Formula at, it's going to be interesting to see whether or not anyone was actually able to figure out a setup for this circuit, or at least acquire one from somewhere. As the DRS is now turned on this lap. So Hannes Schlogel will have DRS and will be able to fight back against Troy, as well as Gianluca Iliano. If they can keep it close enough, we'll see how big of a difference this DRS makes down the back straight, or at least the main straight for the first time. Let's see if Gianluca Iliano has it. Indeed he does. And let's see how much of a gap will that reduce. It was about 9/10 of a second before the braking zone. So, not much. It's about 2/10 is DRS around here. Unless your opponent makes a mistake out of the corner, that is. Jacob Biester and Rolly Schulter are back in the pit lane again. Did they collide again? Here we go. Oh, dear. That is... yeah. Those two have collided twice in a row the moment they get their cars back sorted again. That is a pretty big mistake from both those drivers, but I'm sure they will sort it out eventually. But that does mean they will be quite far off, and I believe Jacob Biester and Rolly Schulter will be basically committing to the fact that they are starting on the front for the sprint, but they'll be at the back for the feature race here today. Lap 4 of 28. And it's looking like Troy Banks, Eystein Schiapolone are currently the only drivers we really need to look out for. Hannes Schlogel as well, having to defend from Troy Banks, who may have to defend from Eystein behind him. So, it'll be interesting to see how this battle plays out. Hannes Schlogel currently putting on a really good defensive effort, but with DRS down this main straight, we know it was about 2/10 of a second. Is the DRS worth? But let's see. Outbraking around the outside. Troy Banks all the way out to the outside of the corner. Not able to get the throttle down early either, and that's going to allow Hannes to start pulling away and also involve Ian Root in the mix. So we now have a 4-car battle for third position on track. We have Hannes Schlogel in 3rd, with Troy Banks 4th, Eystein Schiapolone 5th, Ian Root in 6th. And currently these are your drivers on screen. Gianluca Iliano and Ben Goldthorpe a little bit further up the road. You may have just saw a glimpse of them there on the top of your screen. Gianluca Iliano really trying to get past Ben Goldthorpe and really trying to give points to the N10 Flat Out Sim Racing team, as a move being made there by Eystein Schiapolone on Troy Banks. And it looks like Eystein managed to maybe make the move stick, but Troy keeping it there, keeping it on the inside, may try and battle again, but no, Ian Root takes advantage actually and goes up the inside of Troy Banks. Ian Root tries to cut across, maybe even just shut the door on Troy, but no, they're battling side by side now into turn 1. We know Troy's going to have the inside of the corner. Is he going to have the better brakes as well? Indeed he does. Ian Root has to sort of just relax a little bit before he can go again. He almost had a look there, but nope, thought better of it. Just has to back off for now. And these two will live to fight another day. No DRS from Troy Banks, but DRS from Ian Root may involve Ian back in the battle once more. But no, we move into turn 5, and it's looking like a lot of people so far have been very consistent on this. Hannes Schlogel making a big mistake there out of the exit of turn 6. And actually putting now himself behind the battle he was in before. Eystein Schiapolone currently 3rd place at their home Grand Prix. Troy Banks also his home Grand Prix, with next week actually being Ian Root's home Grand Prix. So, you know, good results here from Eystein and Troy, and then maybe next week Ian can be in the same sort of position. Maybe win the race next week. Get a win at home, always a nice feeling. I believe we've only had that once this season. We have only had one home Grand Prix winner this season, who I believe was Gianluca Iliano at Monza. I do believe. I may be wrong on that one, and I'm sure someone will correct me at some point. But for now, the battle then for third position starting to die off a little bit as Eystein Schiapolone gets a move on. They managed to make the move, get settled in to a rhythm, and now Eystein Schiapolone's just sort of focused on maybe trying to attempt to catch up to Gianluca Iliano and Ben Goldthorpe up in front. But Ben's just a little bit too quick at the moment, it looks like. And Gianluca, even with DRS, isn't really able to fight. But we know this circuit is very difficult, so if you make even just a little bit of a mistake, that little bit of a mistake could be enough to cost you the entire race. We've seen it twice already from Rolly Schilter and Jacob Bisa. We've seen it from Danny O'Keefe as well. Everyone else keeping it pretty clean so far. As I believe Hannes Schlogel made a mistake a little bit further back, which allowed... just touched the grass on the inside. That was what allowed everyone to go through the first time. And this was Danny O'Keefe's incident into the final sector. On the brakes, picks up the power too early, spins it. And those tyres aren't going anywhere fast. As Gianluca Iliano then into turn 1. I wish there was a DRS straight for turn 1. That would be so much better for these cars. But unfortunately we don't have that. They have to just use Slipstream by itself for turn 1. And maybe this is going to be the difference between Ben holding first place here, or his teammate, well, technical teammate at least, getting P2. Of course, one other thing to note is that in terms of the championship standings, Ben Goldthorpe is currently leading the way. Gianluca Iliano is not, so... they will be picking up quite a few points to actually fight against the Racing Lab team. So potentially Iliano may finish third after today in terms of the championship standings. If they can get a good haul of points today, they only need to get, I believe that would be 27 points? 28 points? Yeah, 28 points to put themselves ahead of Riley Jacob by 1 point. And that could be done through, if they get second place here. Let's actually try and work this out live on air. My maths is not that great, so always good to try and improve it. Let's see the points. So they would get 22 points for finishing second. And then if they finish... I mean, then they only need to get 6 points, so they need to finish 7th or higher in the sprint, and they'll be ahead of Riley Jacob, so they will put themselves in third position. Which does mean the difference between first and second is actually a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller than usual in these championships. Normally you look at someone like Gianluca Iliano would finish second and get 20 points, whereas Ben Goldthorpe, who won the race, would get 25. But it looks like the point deficit between first and second is actually a little bit smaller than other race series. And what that means is hopefully the championship stays nice and close, even if we get some unfortunate incidents, like, for example, Rowley Shilton and Jacob Bisa having those unfortunate incidents among themselves. And with lap 9 then underway, 8 laps in the books, and it looks like Ben Goldthorpe and Gianluca Iliano are very, very, very close together in terms of lap times. So, a little bit of an incident there from Ian Rude a little bit further back. I'd imagine that was just a little bit of a mistake coming out of the final corner. That's allowed Hannes Schlogel to get past. And depending on what that mistake was, potentially Ian Rude may have to start trying to really fight back to get this position. However, it does look like he's carrying a lot less downforce than Hannes is. Hannes' downforce config looks like it is incredibly high in comparison, because the straight line speed deficit is rather huge. And that is a big mistake from Gianluca Iliano. Let's see what happened. Into turn number 8 we go. And yeah, driving it way too hard into turn 8. And then the carousel. That is a very, very big mistake. And what that's actually enabled is Eystein Schiapolone to get past, but immediately make a mistake afterwards, putting Gianluca back in second place. And Eystein Schiapolone now needs to be looking in the mirrors potentially, because Troy Banks isn't too far behind. It's all kicking off here as we get into lap 10. Gianluca making the mistake, giving Ben Goldthorpe some breathing room. And all of a sudden, it's looking like it is a battle now for second place between 3 drivers. That is Gianluca Iliano, Eystein Schiapolone and Troy Banks. Hannes Schlogel and Ian Rude, unfortunately, battling amongst themselves for 5th position. Alex Shanna seemingly in a world of his own down there in 7th, with Danny O'Keefe P8 and Frank Bisa just going into the pit lane for P9. Now, Gianluca does need to be careful, because if he makes another big mistake like that, he may actually find himself knocked down into P4. Troy Banks and Eystein Schiapolone both being promoted then to P2 and P3 respectively. Although it does look like Gianluca's pace is starting to pick back up after that little bit of a mistake. And Eystein, unfortunately, is not able to get the same sort of levels of performance. Potentially, again, it looks like Eystein opting for a bit of a lower downforce setup than Gianluca. It seems a little bit quicker on the straights, does Eystein's car. And you can see that in the Delta as well. Normally, when they're on the straight, the Delta goes the way of Eystein, but when they go through the corners and the twisty stuff, where you really need the downforce to keep you in check, Gianluca starts pulling away. See it here down the main straight, even without draft. Eystein is making a big gap disappear very quickly. And loses a bit in every corner, so interesting to note then that Eystein has opted for a bit more of an aggressive strategy in terms of the downforce. Knows that there are really long straights here. You can really make use of having that speed deficit. Although, you need to stay close enough, which could be a problem unless your other opponents make mistakes themselves. Ooh! Huge mistake there from Hannes Schlogel and Ian Rude. Ian Rude coming across Hannes Schlogel into the braking zone. Hannes had nowhere to go and just drove straight into the back of Ian Rude. That was a big incident between the two of them. I'll have to rewind it. Let's see it from Hannes' point of view. Look to the left here. Goes straight back across and brakes immediately. Almost a brake check there from Ian Rude. Nowhere for Hannes really to go. And that is Hannes, unfortunately, you would say, probably out of this race. They'll have to go back into the pit lane, fix their car, and, well, who knows where they'll end up after that. But Eystein Schiapalone starting to slowly reel in the top guys. 1 minute 37.7 so far from Eystein. I would say that's the fastest lap of the race so far, but no, Ben Goldthorpe did a 1:37.03. So, not quite the fastest lap of the race so far. But definitely fastest lap of this particular stint. This is where you're trying to just save the tyres and really just make them last until your pit window. Because they have gone past their best at this point. And with how the pit lane is here as well, I'm actually wondering, it's quite a direct pit lane. You basically, as you come out of the final corner, you swing all the way to the right-hand side, stick there, go up the hill, and filter into the pit lane on the right, go into your box, and come straight back out on the pit straight. So, it's going to be interesting to see whether or not that will affect any of these drivers, and actually mean that the gaps between the drivers need to be a bit more than they normally would to get a free pit stop. Because I feel like, as we see the pit lane there on the right hand side, it's a very short pit lane, or at least it looks short. Although saying that, unlike a lot of pit lanes that have like a lot of curves and weirdness going on, that's sort of just a straight line, so maybe it looks a lot shorter than it actually is. But seeing most people as they come through doing about 45-second pit stops, or at least full pit lane time, I should say. Obviously these cars don't have fuel or much else to really worry about, so for them a full pit lane time is more like 45 seconds and the actual stop is more like 5. So almost half distance of this race gone so far. It's proving to be quite an interesting race, more so in the fact that a lot of people are making mistakes more than anything else. And those mistakes are definitely catching people off guard. I've seen Schiapalone now right on the back of Gianluca Iliano, moving on to lap 14. Alex Shanna also right on the back of Danny O'Keefe as well, I'm pretty sure. But not able to make a move just yet. This battle further down the grid. Going to be interesting to see with the soft tyres on Danny O'Keefe. But the fresher, more worn-in tyres from Alex Shanna. It'll be interesting to see whether or not Alex can really push here to get past Danny, as Eystein Schiapalone does finally get past Gianluca Iliano. I'm not sure if that was because of a mistake from Gianluca Iliano, and immediately I see on my screen that they went off circuit, and indeed they did. That is a big off. And there's Eystein going past, so yep, once again, you make one mistake around this circuit, and that is more than enough to put you back down into P2 or lower. Ben Goldthorpe isn't exactly safe yet either. It's looking like Ben is actually starting to be challenged by Eystein Schierpel, and Eystein doing an amazing job so far at keeping the pace rather consistent and rather fast as well, putting in about a second per lap on the car in front. And depending on when their pit stop times are, I'm wondering whether or not Ben may actually have to consider that Eystein's getting closer and pit for fresh tyres soon, just to try and extend the gap a little bit. So at least when Eystein comes in, they're not pressured too much. I suppose there's only so much you can do around this circuit. That's 2.4 seconds the gap then between Ben Goldthorpe and Eystein Schierpel. After that mistake from Gianluca Iliano, it's going to be interesting to see if Gianluca can bounce back, and if Eystein Schierpel can maybe sneak a win here from the Brit at their home circuit. That would be rather impressive indeed. I don't want to jinx it, but I feel as though we have gotten an intense sim racing podium for at least 2 spots. Gianluca Iliano and Ben Goldthorpe. Well, Ben Goldthorpe at least looks to be rock solid. Isn't really moving from where he is. Driving really consistently, not making any small mistakes. Whereas Gianluca Iliano, I mean, potentially is making a few mistakes. Maybe lack of concentration, not really knowing the circuit potentially is another problem. Because as I say, this circuit is not one that these F1 drivers will be used to having on a regular season, unless of course they drive the sports car stuff, in which case they would be very used to this circuit, but maybe not in cars quite as fast as these. We know the LMDH is still quick, but not quite as quick as an F1 car, as Eystein Schierpel, the first one to blink then out of this top 3. Ben Goldthorpe not pitting, Gianluca Iliano also not pitting. Troy Banks also not pitting. Is an interesting decision from Troy then. Ian Rude does come into the pit lane. And then Schlegel not into the pit lane yet. And that is Eystein out of the pits. Now in P4. And about 35 seconds gap to the leader for the time being. Interested to see what the top speed for everyone is so far. Troy Banks apparently one of the fastest on track. Danny O'Keefe with 324 kilometers an hour. I'd imagine the people without DRS, for example Ben Goldthorpe and Gianluca Iliano, not really able to capitalize on the speed too much. So you can really see based off that who is actually using the lower downforce setups versus the higher downforce setups. Always something to keep in mind. And the laps that everyone has pit on screen for you all. So Eystein Schierpel and Ian Rude currently the only ones. Troy Banks, Gianluca Iliano, and Ben Goldthorpe currently the only ones not to have pit. Everyone else pitting, but Eystein and Ian being the most recent. As further down the grid, Hannes Schlegel now on the hard compound tyres, having pit earlier on in the race, now has Mr. Ian Rude ahead of him. Wonder whether or not Ian is going to be a bit rude in his defense. Pardon the pun. Had to be said, really. Hannes Schlegel, we know is quick, but it's going to be interesting, actually, because Hannes seems like they've been struggling a little bit around here, and with those hard tyres, now versus the softs of Ian's. I mean, Ian's soft tyres are going to feel like absolute glue in comparison to what the mediums felt like near the end of his stint. And I would imagine the hard tyres even more so, unless these hard tyres are starting to feel a little bit better than they used to back when the W12 was popular. Gianluca Iliano into the pit lane then, and Troy Banks still not pitting, so Ben Goldthorpe and Troy Banks trying to get the most out of these soft tyres. I would imagine Istein Chipolone is going to be ahead of Gianluca after this pit stop. But by how much, I wonder. Istein Chipolone fastest lap of the race with a 1 minute 36.1. That's incredibly quick. I mean, that's the best lap so far, and that is at least 0.6 of a second faster is Istein Chipolone, so making that gap very much light work. As back out they go then. Gap's starting to be developed, but of course Ben Goldthorpe and Troy Banks both need to pit. And when they do finally come into the pit lane, we'll start seeing where people end up. I mean, Ben, we would think Ben is going to be a couple of seconds ahead of where Istein is, but who knows? Troy Banks probably going to start fitting in behind Gianluca Iliano, and Ben Goldthorpe does indeed come into the pit lane this time by. Let's see whether or not Troy finally follows in Ben's footsteps. And indeed he does. Troy Banks also into the pit lane. So Istein then currently going through the final couple of corners. Ben Goldthorpe not even having stopped on his box yet. Very, very late in this pit lane. So this undercut strategy played an absolute miracle. Ben Goldthorpe has only just come out of the pit lane now. So that undercut from Istein has actually been huge compared to where they were before. I mean, we were talking a gap of at least 2 seconds from Ben to Istein. Then Istein on these fresh tyres has just absolutely demolished the field. And from here, it's all go. 9 more laps to go of this race. And Istein Chipolone may be able to actually get a win here at home. And start ruining the intense sim racing boys' day. Troy Banks maybe actually starting to fight Gianluca Iliano as well with fresher soft tyres versus Gianluca's rather worn soft tyres now. I'll show you again the pit lane times. 1 lap difference between Gianluca and Troy, but that might be all it needs. And it is very, very cool to see the amount of different nationalities we have on the grid. America seemingly being the most dominated nation, but always cool to see people from Austria, Canada, Italy, the UK, got Ireland represented, Switzerland represented, and of course the big boys from America, who have sort of not really had their way this season. I mean, a lot of the Americans have been struggling, at least in terms of putting themselves back in a position where they can start fighting, because, I mean, you look at the championship standings at the moment, and I think the first highest American driver, I want to say, is going to be Riley Jacob. But with Riley not here anymore, it then falls to Eystein Schierpelone, who's currently down in 7th in the championship. But with a result like this, Eystein Schierpelone is actually going to start pushing a little bit closer to P6. Currently a 19-point difference between Hannes Schlogel and Eystein Schierpelone. Which, if I actually go through and take a look at the points difference, Hannes would have had to have finished 9th for that deficit to go away. At the moment, it's 11 points in the favour of Eystein Schierpelone. So if Hannes has a bad sprint and Eystein wins the sprint, things could look very interesting indeed from a championship standings perspective, because Hannes Schlogel is going to have to start looking behind them in the championship, as well as, of course, this race. Seven more tours of the island to go then. And it's looking like Ben Goldthorpe is really trying to push that car to the absolute limits, because I believe this lap may be a new personal best one more time. And indeed it is, a 1 minute 35.7 from Ben Goldthorpe. So he is absolutely smashing the sector times at the moment. Fastest lap after fastest lap we go. And is Ben Goldthorpe actually going to be able to catch up to the back of Eystein? And if Ben catches up to the back of Eystein, will Ben be able to pass? We've got 6 more laps to go. Has to get past the back marker, I believe, of Frank Bieser. Oh god, Frank blocking a little bit there. Ben, I imagine, being a little bit frustrated with that one, but to get the move made finally. Ben probably thinking that Frank was just gonna let them by in that corner. Just pulls off to the side of the road and lets them through, but no, not quite that easy. And of course, this means Eystein's gap has not diminished as much as perhaps Ben would have wanted. 2.3 seconds in 5 more laps. You're looking at about half a second per lap. And even still, both into the 36s. So very, very quick on these tyres still from Ben Goldthorpe. I'll have to wait and see. Is Ben going to be able to actually push past this deficit that Eystein has built up from an unbelievable undercut? But we have to wonder whether or not, potentially, the energy was spent too quickly. And Ben Goldthorpe's tyres are just that much fresher. You know, Eystein needs to hold on to these soft tyres until the end of this race. We know that soft tyres don't last the longest. They have quite the big drop-off in performance. And you're seeing it visually. Ben Goldthorpe getting closer, corner after corner after corner. But once again, the straight line speed from Eystein seems to be that little bit higher than Ben Goldthorpe is able to do. Let's see if we can get a little bit of a battle for first up on our screen. 1.5 seconds the gap then. That has come down rather quickly indeed. They've all made one stop, of course. Top speed going currently in the favour of Eystein Schiapolone, but I would imagine with DRS, Ben may hit a similar sort of top speed. Is to get within DRS though. He has achieved it now, though every single time he gets close, he starts just missing out that little bit. Through the corner though. Let's see if he can hold the DRS. And if he can, is he going to be able to get close enough to Eystein? DRS flap is open then. So far, it doesn't look like much is going to change between these two in terms of the top speed. Ben Goldthorpe definitely running the higher downforce package. You can see it visually, even without with slipstream, without DRS. Ben Goldthorpe is losing in a straight line to Eystein. And 3 more laps to go before the end of this overall race, this feature race for today. 28 laps of Road America. DRS wide open then from Ben Goldthorpe, and only able to really take out a 10th from Eystein. So yeah, Eystein's car is just absolutely rapid in a straight line. But this is where Ben really needs to start committing. He needs to just be super close through the corners, really start to try and push Eystein for everything he's got to recapture this win. With the carousel we go, trying to avoid the dirty air then of Eystein, taking a bit sharper of a line. And with slipstream and DRS, we're going to imagine that this battle is going to get close. Is Ben Goldthorpe going to be able to go for the move here? Had a little look up the inside, but didn't really think anything of it just yet. Maybe thinks I'll try and do it on the straight into turn 1. Again, we know how quick Eystein's car is in a straight line. And if Ben isn't able to really commit, we'll see him gaining, but not really gaining enough. And eventually Eystein's going to have to make a mistake for Ben to really get back involved one more time. Both drivers making a mistake. Pressure is on then. 2 more laps after this one to go. DRS open, darts to the outside line. Ben Goldthorpe for the lead of this race. Tries to go around the outside of Eystein Schiapolone, but not able to make any moves just yet. Ben Goldthorpe having to sit behind Eystein one more time, doing an impressive defensive drive, leaving enough room. But, again, we know Ben's quick. We know he's going to be able to get past eventually. It's just a matter of if he can do it within the next 3 laps. Tyres in the favour of Ben Goldthorpe. Fuel level, who knows? DRS advantage in the way of Ben Goldthorpe. He's got everything going for him. Just needs to really make it stick and get that move done. We see him just dropping off slowly, slowly, slowly. Trying to break the toe is Eystein. Doing an amazing job at doing that, because once the toe was broken, you see how far away Ben Goldthorpe is already. Ben, mate, you're going to have to make your move sooner or later. You've got 2 more laps. If you want to win this race, if you want to win here at Road America in the feature, you have to do it within this next 2 laps. You can't be sitting behind anymore. Use the DRS to get close. Use all of your energy. You only have 2 laps to make something happen. You see how much closer he gets through Sector 2 into Sector 3, but it's unfortunately never able to have been capitalized just yet. I mean, I don't know whether or not it's due to this insane straight line speed that Eystein seems to have, even without DRS. Eystein just seems to be able to just break away. And here we go, move for the lead again then. Ben Goldthorpe under braking around the outside. Eystein Schierpelone on the brakes as well, a little bit earlier. Ben Goldthorpe making a mistake on exit, and I want to say that unfortunately, with that drive done, Eystein Schierpelone, that is it. Ben is not going to have any more chances to win this race, and what an impressive drive from Eystein Schierpelone. Has to obviously make the last lap, but with a 1 second gap and how difficult it's been so far for Ben to even get close, yet alone make a move, I can't imagine seeing this go any other way except in the favour of Eystein Schierpelone, even if Ben does get close enough for a move. As unfortunately the live timing stopped there for a moment, but it's fine, we're back. We haven't missed anything exciting just yet. Though I say that, Ben Goldthorpe really, really close now on the final lap. Are we going to see an upset? He needs to stay close enough to make a move the same place he did before, but this time make it stick. If Ben Goldthorpe wants to get this win, that's going to be the only way he does it. He is so close. Into the carousel we go. Is Ben going to have the grip available to him to be able to start challenging Eystein Schierpelone? Down the back straight, through the kink we go then. Half a second is the gap. DRS wide open for Ben Goldthorpe. If you want to make this win, you've got to do it now. You have to do it within the next couple of corners, otherwise you are going to lose out on this one. Ben Goldthorpe making it through nice and clean. Eystein Schierpelone, all you need to do is just not mess up the final corner. 2/10 the gap then. And unfortunately, even with Ben Goldthorpe hounding Eystein right at the end, that's top speed proves to be too much. Eystein Schierpelone taking the win here at home in the Road America Grand Prix. 28 laps. And oh my word, that finish was exciting. Eystein Schierpelone and Ben Goldthorpe take a bow. What a way to end that race. Oh. And if you are only just joining us, what a finish you just witnessed. Came down to the final lap. That final lap between Eystein Schierpelone and Ben Goldthorpe. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. Danny O'Keefe and Alex Shanahan, P7 and P8, Gianluca Eliano. A little bit of mistakes, finishing P3. Troy Banks P4, Ian Rude P5, Anna Schlogel P6, Frank Bisa picking up P9, Rolly Schilter and Jacob Bisa looking to try and bounce back in the sprint after colliding in the way that they did earlier on in the feature race here. So, with this race being done and dusted, the moment Alex crosses the line, we should see us moving into the warm-up session. We have 5 minutes to chill. Everybody can grab a drink, grab a snack, because these next 8 laps that we have for you this evening in the sprint is going to be absolute chaos. And of course, one thing to mention, as always, is a word from our sponsor. The rest of our sponsors here at the IFL. Extreme Scoring.
Allow Extreme Scoring to do the work for you.
And we keep it short and sweet around these parts. Of course, Extreme Scoring, one of our main sponsors for this ever lovely league, butt kicker as well. For our sim racing, we absolutely love their work around here. And then Family Money, Patrick Olsen's company, who makes that app, allows us to do all of the wonderful things we do here, give out the wonderful prizes we give out here, and in general, just have an absolute great time racing. I want to try and figure out why potentially the font on the on the stream overlay is not as good as it should be. See if a bit of a refresh fixes it, and indeed it has. There we go, proper font. I'm not sure how long that font was on the screen for. Apologies for that one. But yes, indeed, what a win for Eystein Schierpalone. Main event, of course. Getting a win at your home circuit always feels good. And to do it in such a convincing fashion as well. I was thinking Ben Goldthorpe was running away with it early on. Comes into the pit lane, and all of a sudden this changes. All of a sudden Eystein's out 5 seconds in front. Ben Goldthorpe chases down to the best of his ability. Has a couple chances. A couple really good chances of going for the win. But unfortunately, Eystein's defense just too strong. And Eystein just takes the win. Very convincing. You know? And if this is the quality of Eystein moving forward, I'm excited for this. I'm excited to see more Lumos up there at the top. I'm excited to see everyone battling near the top. You know? I think it could be... It's more exciting when there's more drivers, of course, up near the top of the league. I feel like the more drivers battling for a win, the better. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. I think seeing more people fighting is always a good thing. But 8 laps to go then of our sprint race, and those 8 laps, oh boy, they're going to be rather hectic. I wonder whether or not we can get a sprint start that's not people crashing in a straight line. It would be nice. That would be nice. More exciting than real F1? Well, that is what we're here for. Obviously, F1 currently on a break at the moment. So we're providing the F1 action in the meantime. And what action it normally is as well here in the IFL. The Intend Sim Racing team usually put on a clinic. And the Race Labs team as well, when the Racing Lab guys show up, you know there's going to be sparks flying. But, as we've proven, I've seen Shearpalone on a circuit they know well, potentially on a circuit that they know better than anyone else on the grid, making it look easy. It is a rather large circuit as well. That back straight being, I want to say, one of the longest on this season, actually. I'm not sure if anyone can actually tell me what the longest straight on the calendar is. But I definitely feel like this has to be one of the longest. That main straight. Wouldn't surprise me. And of course, it's not what we're here for. We're here for the grid, then for our sprint. And of course, good luck to Rachel Jimenez there, racing in F3 tomorrow for Lumos. So, good luck, as always. Hope you absolutely smash it out the park. As we look towards the grid then, Jacob Bisa, Rolly Shilter, P1 and P2, Frank Bisa, P3, Alex Shanna, P4, Danny O'Keefe, P5, Hannah Schlegel, P6, Ian Rude, P7, Troy Banks, P8. Further down the grid, we have Gianluca Iliano, P9, Ben Goldthorpe, P10. Of course, because of the win, Iceland Shearpalone in P11. And we are green already, as I tried to get on board with Jacob Bisa, but can't. So we are on board then with Rolly Shilter for the start of this race. And it's looking like it was relatively clean, though I didn't see why Jacob Bisa and Hannes in the background there was off the circuit. But it's looking like it's a clean start so far from these drivers. And just as I say that, there's a car off in the background. Not sure who that is, but Gianluca Iliano looking to try and make a move on Troy Banks then up the inside, very similar to the move that Rolly Schultz tried to make on Jacob Bisa, but this time doesn't hit the car in front, as off is Danny O'Keefe, locking up the brakes there. Huge collisions further up in front, I believe once again. That is going to be, I believe that's Frank Bisa out of the circuit. Alex Shanna there involved somewhere, as Gianluca Iliano and Iceland Shearpalone having a little bit of a coming together as well. Lots of action at the moment. We'll have to see what happened here to Gianluca Iliano. Going into just way too hot. Comes out of the corner straight onto the racing line, but no harm, no foul. Tries to go up the inside of Troy Banks, makes it. Pushes Troy Banks a little bit further out to the outside than Troy probably would have liked, but Ben Goldthorpe up into P3. Eystein already past, or at least trying to fight his way past. And we have absolute carnage and chaos here in the IFL, as always, on a sprint race. I mean, it's 8 laps. These drivers want to win. And Iceland Shearpalone making a very aggressive move straight past Troy, using that top speed advantage we know that Iceland has. And now is Iceland going to be able to pull away and start fighting Ben Goldthorpe for the win of this sprint? Potentially Rolly Shilter, of course, is still going to win this race. I mean, starting on pole in the sprint, if you get a good start... Oh, sorry. Getting yawns mid-race is not good. But, as I was saying, Rolly Shilter with, you would argue, one of the quicker drivers in the season, to be starting on pole for the sprint is going to mean quite a lot, as you see the gap between himself and Ian Rude already, 5 seconds. And then Ben Goldthorpe, how quickly that gap disintegrated between himself and Ian ahead. It's going to mean that Ben Goldthorpe, actually, even if he gets past Ian Rude, is probably going to be around the same pace as Rolly's pace is going to be. And even if not, you've got 6 laps. Well, 5 laps to make up 5 seconds. You need to be doing a second a lap faster. And that's if you can get past Ian, like, now. So, gonna be interesting to see Rolly Shilter potentially just grabbing the win of this sprint race just from starting on pole and just keeping it clean is usually the big thing. Because Ben Goldthorpe and the Eystein Schipperlin, of course, both having to battle way further down, as Ben Goldthorpe does indeed make it past Ian Rude. A little bit of a rude block there on the exit, but no harm, no foul. No contact was made. And now we're going to wait and see if Eystein can start pushing a bit further ahead as well, as Troy Banks makes a big mistake there. Not sure what happened to Troy Banks. Let's see if we can get an onboard. Once again, the corner that everybody hates. I don't think... It didn't look like he got touched. Didn't look like the car jolted or anything. Just was a little bit of a mistake. And unfortunately, that is enough usually to put yourself around Ian Rude. Trying to battle with Ben Goldthorpe here for for second place. Ian Rude currently in 3rd place. I wonder, is Ian going to be able to put the pressure on? We know Ben Goldthorpe is quick, so maybe now that Ben has gotten past Ian, Ben can start putting the pressure on Rolly and just saying, mate, if you make a mistake, I'm right here. Gonna make quick work of the Swiss driver. A couple of people already in the pit lane, which is something we typically see in these sprint races, which is a little bit unfortunate, is people, if they make a mistake, unfortunately being out of the running. I mean, with it being only 8 laps, if you spend any of those laps in the pit lane, you are nowhere going to be near the top, and you're just sort of doing damage limitation, really, hoping everyone else ahead of you has a little bit of an incident. I will say these cars all look incredibly stable through corners that typically they don't run. So it's always cool to see the way that these cars would handle if they went to, you know, for example, Road America instead of Circuit of the Americas, or, you know, throw them on random circuits and just see what sticks. You know, take an F1 car to Bathurst. You know, let's have an Aussie Grand Prix. Why not? I'm down for it. I'd love to see that. W13 around Bathurst, absolutely mental. Could only do it in sim, which is why it would be perfect for us. I'll try and bring it up for next season. We can add it to the calendar as an Aussie Grand Prix. Opening round of the season at Bathurst. That'd be mental enough. Can imagine a sprint race at Bathurst would be absolute chaos. People trying to send it through the mountain. Eystein Schipperlin then catching up to the back of Ian Rude. Is Eystein going to spoil Ian's day? And cause the Canadian driver to drop another spot. So that would be interesting to see whether or not Eystein can actually make this pass. And we know, again, I'm going to keep saying it because it is just so noticeable, is that straight line speed that Eystein has on that car is absolutely mental. And unlike every other car, it also seems like Ian has opted for more of that straight line speed approach, focusing more on the 3 big straights that we have here than the corners, which are few and far between, really, in terms of high downforce approach corners. You know, you've got the carousel, maybe turn 1, the kink, but all of them really pale in comparison to what the straights can offer you. As Eystein sitting back just a little bit. Interesting to see that. I thought Eystein would have gone for the move there up the inside, but it didn't even really look like they were going to. Didn't even really sneak a look up the inside. Maybe just thought it was a little bit too late. Couldn't really carry the speed through the corner and decided better of it. Just going to use DRS and try and make the move into turn 5. Which is interesting that they call this turn 5, considering there's been only 4 corners. These 4 proper corners. Side by side we go then. A little bit of a shove from Ian, but no contact made, so I assume space was given. Just obviously, you normally run quite far to the outside anyway on that corner, so now we'll see whether or not Eystein and Schiavone can bounce back, seeing whether or not they can take advantage of the next DRS zone. And if they can, well, that will be Ian Rude dropping another position, you would have to say, and then immediately you're going to imagine Eystein's going to pull a gap a little bit further out. We know Eystein is very, very, very quick around here in comparison to a lot of the other drivers. Knows this circuit very well, and side by side we go. Contact made between the two of them. Ian Rude into the wall there, and front wing gone. Front suspension broken, and that is Ian Rude out of the race from a contact that looked as though really I feel as though it could have been so easily avoided. It's going to be hard to put a blame on either of them. It seemed like fair racing. Let's go on board with Ian Rude then. Look to the right-hand side. Possible netcode contact between the two of them. Doesn't look like they ever really came together. But unfortunately, when you race over the interwebs, these things do happen. These little touches that normally would be nothing in the real car end up making big deals in this one. But Eystein Schiapolone does now take a provisional 3rd place. Potentially, Ian may look back on that and decide, actually, I don't know if Eystein was in the right here. Should have given me a bit more room. But personally, I would say it was a racing incident. Both drivers racing pretty harsh with one another. Not really giving any room, but at the end of the day, it is racing. Unfortunately, this isn't touring cars, so I can't say the usual line of Robbins racing. We're not doing NASCAR either, so even less for it to apply that. Gianluca Iliano actually trying to catch up to the back of Eystein, but 0.7 of a second. Unless your name's Ben Goldthorpe, you ain't catching that in one lap. I reckon Eystein Schiapolone is going to finish here pretty comfortably in P3. Just don't look behind you. Just look ahead of you. And that will be all they'll need to finish this race in a pretty good P3, you would have to say, given the fact that they were battling so hard for it. Ben Goldthorpe potentially picking up a P2. We see there in the background Gianluca Iliano going off again a little bit wide there and allowing Eystein just a bit more breathing room than they otherwise had. And then Rody Schulter, we haven't really spoken about during this sprint race, but sort of just had it on pole, just ran away, and that was it, really. There wasn't really much else to talk about. Ben Goldthorpe, of course, not going to scoff at a P2 in both races. Especially considering Eystein got the win and then finished 3rd. So managed to beat Eystein in at least one of the 2 races. But across the line then, Rody Schulter will go to win this sprint race here from Road America. Ben Goldthorpe crossing the line for P2, Eystein Schiapolone P3, Gianluca Iliano P4, Danny O'Keefe is going to cross the line for a very respectable P5. Troy Banks coming through the final couple of corners now. Or at least I thought he was. He's going into the carousel. So a little bit further back. And Ian Rude a little bit further back than this. As I say, Troy Banks finishing off in P6. Ian Rude coming around. The final couple of corners will pick up P7. Alex Shanna, Frank Bisa, Hannes Schlegel and Jacob Bisa not finishing the race. Jacob Bisa not even starting for the sprint. Now let's see now then if we can bring in a couple of drivers for an interview. As everyone has now crossed the line, we'll see if we can get our race results for Heat 1, which of course was our feature race. Iceland Schiapalone picking up the win from Ben Goldthorpe and Gianluca Iliano rounding out your podium positions. Troy Banks picking up P4 with Ian Rude P5, Hannes Schlegel P6, Danny O'Keefe P7, Alex Shanna P8, Frank Bisa P9, and then Brody Schilter and Jacob Bisa getting, unfortunately, collecting each other through the early parts of Heat 1 and not really being able to finish. Then, of course, we move into our results for the feature race. Brody Schilter picking up the win from Ben Goldthorpe from Istein Schiapalone. Gianluca Iliano there in P4. Danny O'Keefe P5. Troy Banks P6. Ian Rude P7. Alexander Shanna P8. Frank Bisa P9. Hannes Schlegel P10. And then Jacob Bisa, unfortunately, not even starting the race down there in P11. But let's hear from the man who got second in both races. Ben, mate, second place in both races, both the main and then the feature. And, you know, we've got to talk, first of all, about that main race, that 28 lap. Looked like you had it comfortable, came out the pit lane, Iceton was ahead of you, you hard charge, chase him down, and a huge battle near the end. I mean, what an incredible race that was to watch from the sidelines, but driving it, you must have been trying to find
tense.
everything.
I knew he would undercut me, but the tire deck was so high, so I thought, you know, okay, he's come in quite early, I'll go long, and I'll get him at the end. But I think maybe I waited one lap too many to pit for the softs, and that the gap at the end was a result of that. But it was a great race. I think, you know, it was hard. We didn't make contact. It was relatively fair. It was good racing.
Yeah, absolutely. And one other thing as well that I noticed, so I'm not sure if you noticed it while you were racing, but it definitely seemed like Istein's setup was very much focused on straight line speed. You were catching them so much through corners like the carousel, for example, but on the straights, without DRS, you weren't really catching. Did you sort of have to reconsider where you were going to make moves as a result of that? Or was that something that you didn't really notice until...
I mean, you could definitely tell he had a bit more straight line, but, you know, what can you can't pass in the corner, so at that point, like, what can you do? You just have to follow him and see if he makes a mistake. I think I did have the one lap, maybe our batteries were different levels, and I think I had a run on him, but just broke a bit deep into the uphill right-hander in the second DRS zone and hit the gravel. I nearly lost it, but luckily kept it on the track and nearly got him on the last lap, but I think I just ran out of battery at the end on the run to the line.
Yeah, I believe it was turn 12 or Canada corner, as they call it. It was we were watching on board, and I was just hoping, just saying, like, if Ben can pull off the move, it's going to be a miracle comeback, you know, from 5 seconds back to be able to come back and win this race. But Eystein, I mean, you know, credit to them, you know, they had very hard, very, very hard competition battling them, and then to defend in the way that they did, I mean, you know, credit to both of you. It was one hell of a show. And, you know, Ben, as always, mate, you know, with how you are in the championships now, it's yourself and I believe, I want to say it's you and your teammate who's leading the championship as it stands at the moment. You and Rowley, indeed, is the championship standing so far. So, again, extending the gap a little bit further, obviously with the incidents that Rowley and Jacob had further on. And with only 2 races to go, it looks like if you just finish both, that's championship done and dusted in your favour. Of course, however, I imagine you're going to look to win the last 2 races, right?
You always, yeah. I think, you know, it's if you think like that, you're just gonna. I don't think you can afford to drive under the limit on these cars, and still, like, you know, the competition in this field is strong enough that if I do that, I'll be 12th and I won't score points. So I think I've just got to keep pushing.
So no Nico Rosberg strategy.
We've got the 3 hardest tracks at the end.
Yeah.
I think Canada's very tough. Brazil is very tough. And Road America, well, I've never driven it before, but it was very tough as well.
Yeah.
And very narrow. I mean, it's a big track, but it's very, very narrow. And
yeah.
that probably helped me a bit at the start because I didn't get the best start in the feature race. But luckily, no, like, you can't even go 3 wide on that pit straight. So I kind of kept the lead into turn 1 and was happy about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Canada's the same. Canada's very narrow as well. So it'd be interesting to see what happens there in the sprint race as well.
Yeah, and of course, the other thing to note about Canada and the Brazilian Grand Prix is that they are slightly longer in terms of laps, but maybe not in terms of lap time. We know Brazil is very, very quick as a circuit, especially these days with these cars. And, you know, 11-lap sprint around Brazil, I mean, if you get one incident that causes a safety car, I mean, hopefully we don't have a safety car in the sprint, but that pretty much solves the race straight away, really, won't it? In terms of as the race is, as you mentioned, very tight, very narrow circuits, both of them, Canada and the Brazilian Grand Prix circuit. Is there any sort of strategy you have going into either of those? Is there any sort of, obviously it's start on pole and go from there, but
yeah, that's the strat. I don't really think too far ahead about it. I think you kind of have to be a bit reactive with the strategy. Yeah, we'll see what cards were dealt on the day.
Well, yeah, absolutely. But again, taking home P2 in both the sprint and the main here at Road America, and as you said, it was a circuit that you've never really driven before, so, you know, it's a pretty good result considering the fact that you've never driven here before, and it looks like Eystein definitely had. So to be able to just pick up P2 is a good feeling, and naturally you've got more points going in your favor. I mean, with the lack of racing lab in the last couple of races, means you're in 10 guys. I mean, all of you are just sort of storming ahead of them, and potentially the rate that it's going, we may see an Intend sim racing 1, 2, 3, and 4. Obviously, I know you two are split into an A team and a B team, but it's basically all the same, isn't it?
Yeah, same, like, management, I guess. Yeah, that'd be good for the team, teams. Don't know what you want to say. Yeah, we'll see where we are at Brazil with the teams.
Yeah, and of course, mate, as always, congratulations. And any last words, any last thoughts you have before we let you go? Anyone you want to give a shout out to?
Oh well, I've had a request, like a DJ, like a kids disco, to shout out the better half again, because I thought last time when I did it, the next race didn't go very well, so it was a bit of a sore point because I thought, it's a bit like the voodoo doll situation.
Yep.
I'm gonna risk it and say it, shout out this time, and next race will be good, and then I can do it every time.
Yeah.
The curse will be broken.
That is what we hope.
I broke the even odd race curse now.
Nice.
Because you've interviewed me 2 races in a row. This is a big deal.
Well.
So if we're in the curse breaking mood, why not? Why not just get rid of everything?
I mean, I'm gonna be honest. I hadn't actually noticed that it's been races in between that you haven't been on a podium. But yeah, I mean, now that I look back at it, that makes sense. And hey, I mean, it looks like the way that your races have gone, at least in the latter part of this season, it definitely seems like you're getting into more podium races and at least having better results. Everything seems to be a little bit cleaner as well from the entire field, which I think is helping.
Yeah.
Especially that sprint start was surprisingly very clean.
There was one incident, maybe one person on the grass. Other than that, it's clean. I think I'd like a win in a feature because I've been second in the past. I think 3 races in a row. Hungary, Japan, and today.
Yeah.
So hopefully one better in Canada.
I mean, hopefully. I mean, yeah, because we've had Riley Jacob winning the first 5 in a row. Then Gianluca wins, obviously, his home Grand Prix, which was cool. Rowley won at Red Bull Ring. Rowley won at Hungaroring. Oyvind came back, won at Japan. So, yeah. Hopefully, we see Ben Goldthorpe's name up there at Canada, and then also Brazil.
I feel
Why
a bit
not?
Keke Rosberg,
Yeah.
in 1983, was it? In his championship year. He only won 1 race, but he won the championship, so that's who I'm trying to emulate.
Yep.
Maybe go one step further and not even win 1 feature and win the championship. That would be nice.
I was going to say, you can't say you haven't won a sprint race, because you have.
Yeah. I mean a feature.
Yeah. I was going to say, if you hadn't won either the feature or the sprint the entire season, that would be one heck of an accomplishment. Still win the championship. But mate, I'll let you head off. As I say, congratulations once again from yourself, and hopefully, as I say, you're back here again in the comms box, and we can be talking about a win next time.
Yes.
In both races.
Fingers crossed. Okay. Thank you.
Cheers, mate. And of course, that is all we have time for here at the IFL. No one else seems to be wanting to do an interview, so we will wrap it up. And of course, as always, check out our Formula 3 broadcast tomorrow. It will be on the Team Goon Squad channel, as I've mentioned before. And also, make sure you join us next week, where we go racing from the circuit Jacques Villeneuve, or the Canadian Grand Prix circuit, as most of you call it, where maybe Ben Goldthorpe does get his maiden win here in the IFL season. Better late than never, as we always say. But you guys have all been wonderful. I have been Alyssa. I will see all you guys later on next week. Take care of yourselves. Peace and love.